Hi, thank you. I'll be talking about Seamful design in Godot. My name is Thijs. I make small experimental games in Godot. I'm interested in the materiality and situatedness of play, and this is my first ever constrast talk, so I'm a bit nervous, and probably not everything will go smoothly, but that's exactly what this talk will be about. So, contemporary technology often focuses on seamlessness, this notion of providing a fluid experience without friction. This often means that the technology strives to be invisible. It's these things where things magically work. For example, if I'm playing music on my phone and connect my Bluetooth headphones, automatically the output device switches from the phone's speaker to the headphones. And this is super convenient, makes listening to music a very smooth and immersive experience. And we see these types of design decisions all around us, including in games. For example, cross-platform multiplayer, where there's no hiccups between different systems, or in design itself, with open world games where there's no loading between different zones so that the immersion is never broken. And all these seamless decisions have the same design goal, concealing the technology so that we can focus on the activity at hand, in our case, on the gameplay. And this is super useful in terms of clarity, simplicity, and efficiency. And I want to emphasize that I'm not here to take a step at seamlessness. These things can be wonderful and provide a technologically impressive experience. However, I do want to acknowledge that seamlessness is susceptible to obfuscation, in particular, obfuscation of the resources that is required to make the technology run, the labor that is required to make it work, and the particularities of the system. And I think it's important as makers to acknowledge these invisibilities and maybe use that in our games as well. So the question, seamfulness, on the other hand, is a notion that embraces complexity and friction of technology to expose the boundaries and inner workings of the technology that we engage with. So for today, the question is, what can seamfulness mean for games? First, I want to highlight a few of the frictions we might encounter in games. For example, patchy network strength in location-based games might be a technological friction we run into. Or on a design friction level, it might be UI placement in VR games. It might even be as simple as implementing jumping and gravity in your game, which is very frequent, but can often be very different among different games, right? So how do we work with these frictions in a transparent way? Here's an example of Minecraft, Minecraft's world generation screen. There's an obvious theme in world generation, namely that it takes time to generate a world. And different games can do different approaches to hide this or distract the player while the world is loading. But what Minecraft does is show the exact step of world generation it is in, and it even shows a little pixelated view with colors associated to these different steps of world generation. And this is super cool on a technological level, and maybe it can help with some bug fixing or whatever. But for me, this is also where my personal relation with this world start to build. Even before setting foot into this world, because the transparency that was given by the makers of this game, I'm already invited to connect with the world. Now, this is an example on a technical level, I'd say, but I'm also interested in seamfulness during the gameplay itself, and maybe even as the goal of the game. And for that, I want to give an example of my own games. It's called Benches. It's about Rotterdam's public benches. In this game, you see a series of vignettes of different benches in the city, and when you press the sit button, a figure appears at the place of its oscillating slider. There's no winning or losing. The only thing that happens is that a field recording starts to play the moment you place this figure. Now, as you move through the game, it becomes increasingly difficult to place these figures next to each other due to the physical properties of these benches. Well, benches has a lot of frictions. I went around with my phone to make these photos, and I used my phone to record the audio, which resulted in low-resolution photos and distortions and environmental noise in the audio. There's non-continuous placement of these figures, and the players need to wait for the field recordings to finish. And while I was making this game, I tried to fix all these things. I tried to smooth everything out to make the perfect game. However, as I was making it, and definitely after releasing it on itch, I've come to realize that it is exactly these imperfections that bring about a personal and authentic experience to this game. It's the material honesty that they bring, and they help contextualize the game, right? These are benches not just in your screen, but they're actually benches in the city, and our relationship with them reaches beyond the screen. Most importantly, though, there's seamfulness in the theme of the game. With it, I hope to reflect on the parts of public infrastructure that would otherwise go unnoticed. Benches was, not surprisingly, made in Godot. And just like I think there's room for seamfulness in the games that we play, I think there's room for seamfulness in the tools that we use. So that brings us to the question, what does seamfulness mean for Godot? And this is a question that I want to ask more so than answer. So what could be examples of seams? Maybe it's the particularities of exporting to different platforms, frictions of cross-language scripting, GDScript, C++, etc., or working inside and outside of the editor. For this last one, I want to give one sweet example that I ran into myself. At some point, I wanted to rename my project folder, and at the time, I was still unsure of where to do this in the editor. So I opened the project.godot file and was met with this message. Engine configuration file, it's best edited using the editor UI and not directly, since the parameters that go here are not all obvious. I found this a really sweet and cute interaction between me and the file, because it acknowledges its own vulnerability. And it's obviously written by some human that I have never met, yet there was now some connection between us. And it's exactly this transparency that made me aware of the situatedness of the software and made me appreciate the community behind it. And this is especially important for Godot, given that it's open source software. Luckily, seamfulness naturally aligns with the freedoms of free Libre open source software. If seamlessness is all about concealment and efficiency and reduction of cognitive load, seamfulness is all about transparency and agency and providing for critical interaction. And this goes hand in hand with the freedoms to inspect and customize and these kind of good things. So, to recap, seamlessness tries to make the technology invisible, and seamfulness embraces complexity and friction. And they both have their affordances, and there's a place for both of them. But I do hope that as we continue developing Godot and continue developing games in Godot, that we can embrace this technology that we're using sometime and not make it always invisible. Okay, thank you. That was it.